Good evening and welcome to this installment of the Kuhn Academy, AP US History version. All right, we're going to talk today about the Missouri Compromise. All right, what you're going to be doing in class on Wednesday is an exercise about the era of good feelings, as it's called. Okay, now Professor Foner does not use that term in his book very much because good feelings doesn't always reflect the era. However, that's what it is called. And we're talking about the period from about 1816 to 1824. Missouri Compromise happens right in the middle of that, contradicting maybe the idea of the era of good feelings. Okay, now we need to ponder here going into this lesson is if you were a political party or a faction, what would you want control of? If you could choose one, would it be the House, would it be the Senate, would it be the presidency, or would it be the Supreme Court? Okay, pause it for a second, think about that, and then decide what you would want, and then that's going to kind of dictate how this Missouri Compromise goes, perhaps. Okay, now as we know, we have the Northwest Ordinance that we've learned about under the Articles of Confederation. This was passed in 1787, affecting the 5 now states in the Northwest Territory. Okay, anything north of the Ohio River was going to be a free state. Anything south of it was going to be a slave state. Okay, that is essentially how our country was split. So our first division between slave and non-slave was right here, called the Mason-Dixon line. All right, and then that got extended along the Ohio River until we reached the Mississippi River. All right, everything west of that was still unclaimed territory until the Louisiana Purchase, and even then there were no states. Okay, now at the time, in 1820, we have 11 slave states and 11 free states. That means in the Senate, every vote on anything slave-related is going to be 22 to 22. Okay, so everything was pretty much in harmony, and that's part of the reason why we had an era of good feelings. Everybody was getting along. Okay, now until that Louisiana Purchase, which, as you can see, we double the size of the United States, we have no line to split slave and free states at that stage of the game. All right, so we know in 1803, Jefferson buys the land from Napoleon. Okay, and it's all west of the Ohio River, so there is no natural boundary to determine slave and free states at that point. All right. So what happens in 1820 is Missouri is going to petition for statehood as a slave state. All right, it's up to Missouri. They have slavery there. It's an agricultural state. They wanted to come in as a slave state. Now this is going to throw off the balance because you're going to have more slave states than free states. Okay, so we have a problem. When that bill is introduced in the House of Representatives, a guy named James Tallmadge, all right, stands up and introduces what's called the Tallmadge Amendment. An amendment, as we know, isn't a change to a bill. This is not an amendment in the sense of the Constitution, but it's an amendment to Missouri's petition to be a state. Okay, so Tallmadge is from New York. So what do you think? Slavery? No slavery, being from New York. Okay, he's against slavery. All right, so he amends the bill to say Missouri is a slave state, not a free state, and any slaves living in Missouri will be emancipated, all right, or given their freedom. Emancipate is a great word, non-Taylor people. Okay, so that's the Tallmadge Amendment. Obviously, the southern states opposed that amendment, all right, no chance, that's not going to happen. We don't want slavery to be outlawed in Missouri. We want to see it expand into the new territory, okay? So enter our friend Henry Clay that we learned about today, hopefully, with the American system. Okay, he's a representative from Kentucky. Now that is a slave state, and he also owns slaves. Okay, he's known as the Great Compromiser. All right, so we're going to turn to him for the first of 3 great compromises he's going to be responsible for. Okay, what he proposes is that Missouri will be a slave state. That's what they want. They have slavery there. That only makes sense. Now, plus being from Kentucky, that's going to allow it to expand due west of his state and increase the value of his slaves. What we're going to then do is we're going to take the part of Massachusetts that's on the coast, that's not connected to Massachusetts, kind of New Hampshire's kind of stuck in between there, and we're going to make that a free state. So Massachusetts is going to give up its territory, call it Maine, and that'll become a free state. So now we're at 12 to 12. Everybody's happy, okay? But I know you're sitting out there saying, wait a minute. What happens when a new state wants to come in? We can't just always add new states. So Massachusetts gives the land up to Maine, okay, and they come up with a compromise that they're going to use 36 degrees, 30 minutes. This is the only line of latitude you need to worry about until the Korean War, okay, called 36 degrees 30. It's the southern border of Missouri, okay. Anything north of that will be a free state, all right. So anything north of 3630 will be free. Anything south will be slave. So if you look, Look at all the land the North got. No slavery here. All right? And this territory here, Louisiana's already a state, so they're out. Okay? But all this territory will be slave once they come into the Union. Don't worry about this, because that is owned by the Spanish. This compromise would not apply to there. So if you look, the North looks like they're gaining a lot, but let's see. Okay? Now, Thomas Jefferson, 6 years before he dies, all right, writes a pretty violent protest against this compromise. Violent ain't the right word, but a pretty bitter protest against it. All right, the significance of this is slavery is allowed to expand. Slavery has expanded for the first time. Okay, and that's really what the Southerners were happy about. They got a slavery into a new territory, so if it can expand there, it can expand anywhere. Okay, it continues this feeling of sectionalism. During the War of 1812, we saw a lot of nationalism, where we support the country, we're feeling good about being Americans. Here we're being starting to be sectional. We're thinking of our region of the country and what's good for us, as opposed to thinking nationally. And Jefferson's speech was called letter was called "A Fire Bell in the Night." Okay, implying that we're in the middle of our deep sleep, and all of a sudden we hear a fire bell that's kind of waking up and burning us down before we can realize we can do anything about it. He was really upset that we were splitting the country on sectional lines as opposed to ideological lines. He didn't mind splitting the country on views of the Constitution, the National Bank, or something like that. He said this is dangerous because now we're drawing a line telling people what to think on either side. All right? So that concludes the Missouri Compromise. We'll use this in class, among other things, on Wednesday. All right? Thanks for listening. And to the Kuhn Academy. And remember, we're not learning history, we're making history. Sorry, I got to work on that tagline for the future reference. All right, thanks for listening.